I was at an ecstatic dance recently, or last week, and I'm usually pretty internally focused when I'm in a movement practice. But at one point, my attention was drawn outward to what was happening around me. And I noticed that each person dancing close to me was a woman with long, loose hair, and she was in a skirt or a dress. And they all seemed deeply immersed in their own inner world, exploring their bodies, their minds, whatever was coming up for them. And I felt a kinship and gratitude that here, we're free to do that. It's safe. And as I looked around, I heard come up from inside of me, the witches are coming back. And I wanted to dance around going, the witches are coming back, the witches are coming back. I didn't, though that's totally something that I would have done. But when I say witches, this isn't about some belittling stereotype or Halloween costume or weird cartoon image, right? This is about the sacred feminine returning. It's about a deeply and secretly held and long cultivated wisdom, intuitive medicine, highly sensitive embodiment, and unimaginable freedom, and a new balance in relationship to the masculine, rising anew to protect and hold space, not oppose, misunderstand, or persecute. Rian Eisler, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, wrote in The Chalice and the Blade that back in the day, between 7,000 and 3,000 BCE, human culture was based on partnership, on life in balance, interplay, not power or dominance over an other. During this time in old Europe and parts of the Mediterranean, societies were largely egalitarian and matrilineal or matrifocal, centered around and referring back to the female line, and centered around nature-based spirituality, goddess worship, and cooperative values. Artifacts from this time feature goddess figurines, circular dwellings, and symbolic chalices or womb shapes, representing this life-giving power, fertility, and cyclical balance. Most importantly, though, there is no archaeological evidence of large-scale war, the need for fortification or protection, or any form of gender-based domination or hierarchy. Around 3000 to 2000 BCE, things began to shift as the Indo-European peoples from the north began to move south and invade. This brought an influx of male-dominated warrior cultures, sky god religions, and hierarchical structures based on conquest and control. These dominator cultures gradually overthrew the partnership societies, replacing their sacred symbols of peace, life, and union with symbols of fear, domination, and death. This shift laid the groundwork for thousands of years, perpetuating intricately architected and tightly woven patriarchal systems involving, well, many things, but for the purposes of this talk, the repression and persecution of women, especially those who carried remnants of partnership-based approaches or intuitive power. Now, there was a lot more at play here, but the focus of this talk is on how it specifically affected women. So let's continue to summarize and see how this played out over time. This dominator energy began to organize into massive empires. 3000 BCE to 500 CE, early city-states became Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Societies became more rigidly hierarchical, with kings, priests, and warrior classes conquesting and dominating over unnamed commoners and females. Laws became institutionalized with codes of conduct, standing armies, and state-sanctioned religion. Spiritual authority shifted from female-led or inclusive traditions to male priesthoods and patriarchal deities. This set the precedent for the forming of what was considered more legitimate top-down power structures enforced by conquest, who controlled the most land, and religious dogma. 500 CE to 1300 CE, after the fall of Rome, feudalism took over, structuring European society with kings granting land to nobles who ruled over the peasants who called the land home. Power was deeply entrenched in land, which equaled wealth, which equaled power. The Catholic Church, positioning itself as the mediator between God and humanity, became the spiritual and political authority across much of Europe. Women were increasingly silenced, confined to domestic roles or convents, and older healing, herbal, and intuitive traditions, though they were still widely practiced by the people in private, were shut down and increasingly seen as dangerous or heretical. During this time, the distorted and negative witch archetype began to proliferate, as the church actively sought to do away with non-Christian or hedonistic pagan practices. Then came the Black Death and a massive breakdown. The Black Death killed somewhere around half of Europe's population over the span of 4 years, an estimated 50 million people. Now, we have a recent experience which we can compare that to. The COVID pandemic has taken just over 7 million lives nationwide, or worldwide, I'm sorry. And how scary was that, right? Now imagine 7 times that, but without a medical system and no means of widespread communication or information dissemination. And I'm sure you can imagine, widespread fear and chaos ensued, along with a deep loss of faith in the church's authority. And then the blame game started. Jews, women, lepers, astrologers, and heretics were all pointed at, and in many regions, the remaining healers, midwives, and herbalists, and anyone who still held folk or intuitive wisdom, were scapegoated. Things got more than a little out of hand. The plague destabilized the power structures that were still expanding and taking hold, so the need to reassert control got even more extreme. Not long after that, the witch hunts began. In the century after the plague, the church and state began persecuting witches in earnest. The Malleus Maleficarum, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, published in 1487, The Hammer of Witches, systematized misogynistic and superstitious views of women and witches. Women were tortured, burned, and drowned, often for practicing healing arts, owning property, or simply being different. Estimates say 40 to 60,000 were executed. However, due to a lack of record keeping and reports of rampant, self-organized, roving mobs, many say it's probably closer to over 1 million who were persecuted, accused, and killed. 85% of those were women. The fear of the feminine, intuitive, and uncontrollable was in full force. Now in America, in 1692, the witch hunts didn't last long. Hundreds were accused and 20 executed. But then a governor or mayor's wife was accused, and he was like, wait, my wife? That's enough. This is ridiculous. We're not doing this anymore, right? However, in Europe, witch hunts lasted for some 500 years, with the peak being between 1400 and 1700. That's more than 10 generations of systematized persecution, accusation, attack, terror, and execution of women in a variety of barbaric and inhumane methods. Many scholars agree that the climate of fear resulting from the Black Death of the mid-1300s created a deep need to blame someone for all the suffering. Couple that with a rising distrust of non-male, non-Christian authority, and the growing association of the feminine body with chaos, temptation, and impurity. Midwives, herbalists, menstruating bodies, and anyone exhibiting even a hint of intuitive wisdom in particular became highly suspect. Thus began the campaign to root out the untamed, the emotional or sensitive, the cyclical, and other mysterious and misunderstood qualities inherently residing in the feminine. A systematic cultural erasure ensued. The belief-based religions, with fear and control, conformity and domination, conditioning at their core, swept through the populations of the land, forcing retreat and compliance, instilling self-consciousness and fear of persecution and attack due to a whole new way of how the woman and her ways were interpreted and perceived. Don't do that anymore. Don't be like that anymore, or you will elicit suspicion, the wrong kind of attention, and harsh, even deadly judgment. Repression set in pretty quickly. There is a fear that women have learned to live with, a fear of being attacked by men and other women. There's a kind of hypervigilance or on guard hyper-awareness and questioning of trust, whether or not it's safe or whether or not you can be real or be at ease in any given situation or environment, that pervades the lived experience of all women. It is very real and that persists to this very day. And what that does to the physical body is just awful. The cortisol, the masculine energy, it keeps us in a very compromised state, which is incredibly unhealthy and disempowering. Now, why did I name this talk The Witches Are Coming Back? I could have just as easily named it The Bitches Are Coming Back, right? Witch, bitch. What is the best, most immediate way to cast out a woman in this modern age? We don't walk around calling each other witches, though at one time it would have gotten her tortured and killed. Nowadays it sounds kind of silly, right? Call her or accuse her of being a bitch or a whore. This hatred and persecution of the female, it is important to note, turned into hatred of the self, hatred of other women. Because one of the most powerful ways to control a group is to turn them against themselves and each other, right? It pains me to acknowledge, and it is completely unacceptable, how many times I have heard a woman say that she hates being a woman, hates her body, and feels trapped by and dreads her cycles, and hates and doesn't trust other women. So let's get this straight, okay? Women's bodies are miraculous portals that transport souls in from other dimensions and realms. The problem and issue is that we in our bodies have been vilified, controlled, shamed, and abusively and coercively forced to fit into timelines and calendars and shapes and sizes, and, well, has been overly subjected to, controlled, judged, and oppressed by the male gaze, right? Now, imagine a world where women raise women to love themselves, honor their bodies, to delight in and move with the rhythms and differing energies and qualities that are a natural part of her cycles, where the structures of education and society at large, work and play, honor and accommodate these shifting cycles and are designed to play upon and tease out the valuable and valid biological needs and greatly varying energetic and vibrational qualities of the cycles as they naturally occur, where it isn't something we hide or are ashamed of, but benefit from and use to our advantage. Now, not in a gain and advantage in a competitive or hierarchical sense, right? I'm talking about benefiting us personally, allowing us full unfettered expression, benefiting and serving those around us, the people in our lives, because we're healthy and happy and in sync, which then benefits society at large, where creativity, caring, and empathy are highly valued and respected, where you would never, ever, ever hear a derogatory or insulting reference to a woman who is bleeding or in any particular phase of her cycle, where terms like that, inferences like that, are completely removed from our vocabulary and common talk, from our culture of treatment toward and reference to those embodied as female. Something is indeed stirring. And as is usually the case with efforts to suppress what cannot be, something didn't just survive beneath the surface. The inward whispers and dreams did continue to stir. The innate and inherent qualities of the female psyche and biome, although hid away for so long due to necessity, continued to navigate their way through subterranean territories, underground springs, and not often spoken of caverns of thought, belief, energy, and power. The feminine is rising, and a great restoration is underway. A re-honoring of the sacred chalice upon the table of life. But this is not and cannot be an isolated arising. In order for it to be fully realized, there needs to be the healed and whole sacred masculine, clearing a space for her, protecting that space, and holding the gates open for all the healed souls of both genders to come and create this new world we are so frequently now hearing prophesied and which is now upon us. Now, I know that witch is a loaded term. Maybe I shouldn't have used it. It's been twisted and demonized. So maybe we can reclaim it. Maybe we give it a new language. Wisdom keeper, medicine woman, earth priestess, sovereign one. How do we create language acknowledging all the profoundly difficult and deep inner work that has been done by women throughout all these centuries? What name exemplifies this elevated and earned embodiment, cultivated clarity, and ancient knowing, which is ready to be reawakened? Because this is not a role that you can just take or claim, right? You have to become it. So what about these gatekeepers and space holders who are also returning? The wise men too are awakening and being called to remember and re-embody their sacred duty, to guard the gates, to hold the space, to step to the side, silently whispering, "I will hold the perimeter while you step forward." This is not a reversal of roles or a swing all the way in the opposite direction. Not at all. It's a reunion and recalibration of aligned and right roles. But to take up this mantle, men need to do their own deep inner work of honestly and humbly recognizing and acknowledging, processing and releasing the effects and influences that these patriarchal millennium have had on them too. So be really honest with yourself. Look back at your life and take note of all the times you were exposed to negative, limiting, and demeaning attitudes and interpretations of women. All the ways you have been inculcated into, played into, and benefited from the system as it currently is and has been. All the times you heard men clap back at women, accusing them of double standards. Here's the thing. There should be and will be a double standard, or more accurately, a multi-standard. Men and women should be and will be held to different standards because they are inherently and fundamentally different. Yes, we both inhabit human bodies which are basically structured the same, but biochemically, energetically, psychologically, and emotionally, we are profoundly different, and this needs to be acknowledged and recognized and accounted for. And space does need to be made for this, in favor of this, and in celebration of this. And of course, I'm not getting into non-binary and the agender and gender neutral, all the variations that need to be recognized, accounted for, and to foster a truly inclusive and equitable social space, right? Everyone who didn't fit the role and had to contort themselves or otherwise suffered in many ways. In many of the healing and self-development communities I have experienced recently, which are 90 to 95% predominantly populated by women, I'm noticing many women stepping forward and asserting that they feel called to work specifically and exclusively with men, that there is a great need there, yet also not yet a huge market. Most men do not want to do this deep inner work, to step fully into their divine masculine, because it requires a level of vulnerability they refuse to step into. Many men are mortified because they know how harsh it's been, and they are terrified of being attacked by the same system and by women. They assume or expect retribution, being emasculated, right? Blamed, held to task for what the larger, out of control and unhealthy masculine has perpetuated for so very long. These fears must be encountered and processed, and it won't be easy for you guys. You guys have to go through the fire. From my perspective, there's no other way around it. Luckily, most or many of us have processed the deep anger and hatred. We have been brave enough to dive into that pit of despair and the quicksands of bias and inequality. So we are uniquely qualified to guide others through that process. We can hold a safe space for that exploration and release of that primal scream that arises through your physical body from a place you didn't even know existed or were scared to open into. that you had to watch as your wives and daughters, sisters and mothers were threatened, tortured, and killed over and over and over again. So what is involved in the process of cultivating this sacred wisdom? To fully participate in and engender the rise of the deep feminine and the return of the wise woman and the sacred masculine, to rise in this way involves fully immersing yourself in the deep inner process of learning and unlearning, doing and undoing, blossoming and casting off. Cultivating this level of wisdom requires long periods of silence and stillness, non-doing, devotion to the higher self, in yourself and in others, mourning the losses, and profound and deeply felt presence with yourself, your feelings, your heart, and call it what you will, higher power, God, goddess, the universe. This is a self-directed reclaiming of self through an often long and winding path back to truth. Both men and women must become trustworthy of power, quite often through many trials and errors. You must be willing to tease out and release the false self to embody the true one, so we can start to practice and model what really works and really moves the needle forward. This is a sacred time. Yes, it feels scary. Yes, it can be disorienting, but it is safe now. It is safe to rise, to speak, to remember. It is safe to heal. The larger wave is most certainly advancing in this direction, but still there needs to be vigilance, because some of the old ways, the old beliefs, habits, and influences have not been fully healed or balanced completely. So proceed with intention, with reverence, and with love. And always remember that your safety now is made possible by those who were not safe before. This new level of protection must arise from within a humbling awareness of the long, excruciatingly painful history of male domination that worked for so long, but ultimately didn't work. So let's do a quick few clearing phrases. Take a nice deep breath, focus on your heart center and solar plexus, and repeat out loud after me. I'm so sorry you were scared. I'm so sorry they persecuted you for being different. I'm so sorry they silenced your natural tendencies and called them dangerous. I'm so sorry they turned your gifts into threats. I'm so sorry they made you fear your own power. I'm so sorry they convinced you it wasn't safe to be who you really are. Now, I want to encourage you to come up with your own phrases that are personal to you. Okay, once you tap into the deep well of persecution, you'll come up with a lot, trust me. There is a lot there. Keep offering compassion to those memories and experiences held in the tissues of your body, your bones, and your energy field. Your participation in this deep work is a vital thread in the collective awakening unfolding now. And your process is part of that shift. So engage with it diligently and with enthusiasm. The new earth is not a place. It's a collective field rooted in integrity and integration, wisdom and self-awareness, interdependence, and mass collective epiphanies and co-creations. This frequency is inherently feminine in nature, not as a gender identity, but as a creative, intuitive, life-honoring force. And I want to say that it's long overdue, but it's actually right on time. The feminine doesn't rise to threaten or overthrow the masculine. She rises to balance the field. And as she does, the healed masculine increasingly shows up as the space holder for her full expression, as the guardian of sacred spaces and the soft unknown. He becomes the builder of energetic and feeling-based scaffolding that supports and contains the great shift. So how can women step into leadership in the new earth? Because this is not just about stepping up. It's about stepping into alignment with your originary self-sense and letting leadership be something that emanates from you rather than a strategic play, right? Pay attention to the habitual tendency to want to drop back into that old system and way of approaching and perceiving things. So if you're feeling called and your body is alive with shimmering goosebumps, then work to reclaim your inner authority, okay? Practice decision-making from intuitive knowing rather than fear or overanalysis. Notice where you're still outsourcing your power to teachers, traditions, men, culture, validation, and start to gently reel it back in. Create a daily non-negotiable practice of stillness or devotion, where you become the watcher, the witness, the seer. You no longer need external approval in order to act on your knowledge. Practice getting into the heart of things, naming the deeper truth when others are still dancing around on the surface. Sometimes you might want to, but don't wait. Now, I'm a big proponent of holding my tongue, right? I like to wait and see. I'm not always interjecting, right? And this is part of becoming the watcher and the witness. Most things play out and work themselves out without needing to intervene. But when you watch from a place of the witness and from a place of knowing, it becomes very clear when it's time to interject, right? Just allow it to come forth and emerge. Speak with rootedness. Because truth has a vibration and people feel it, even when they resist it, right? This is not aggressive or even assertive. It's a particular tone of voice that has a certain quality to it. You'll hear it and feel it when it arises. Learn how to lead with the heart and the body. Learn to trust your body and inner felt sense and use it as a compass, right? This body is your sacred technology. Move in and through your body in ways that activate confidence. Dance, walk, breathe, perform embodied rituals, and continue normalizing emotional depth, vulnerability, and compassion as leadership traits. Not as an Achilles heel, right? Not as a manipulation tactic or liability. Oh no, I exposed myself. No more of that. This is an old system and the old game based upon CYA, right? Protection. Protection is built in now. Adjust to that new reality. That feeling of needing to be protected from no longer comes into your field. And please, let's clean up the sisterhood wound. We cannot lead New Earth if we're still entangled in comparison and competition or mistrust of other women. So find or form circles of genuine encouragement and reciprocity, and practice celebrating with and shining forth in the presence of other radiant women so we can all rise together. Be the channel, right? You don't have to construct an identity. You already are. Discover that which you are more. Leadership means becoming clearer, more attuned, and more aligned to what you are. I am. Focus on discovering and then transmitting your own frequency more. And make peace with visibility. Clear ancestral and karmic memories of persecution, silencing, and invalidation. I've heard it referred to as the witch wound, right? You must be seen to step forward and lead. So clear everything that is keeping you hiding. Reframe visibility as service and honor rather than exposure. Your soul came to be recognized, so let it be. And know that your presence is all the protection you need. The more rooted you are, the less armor you need, right? Your inner state protects you better than any expressed or defended boundary. Trust that the healed masculine around you will feel compelled to rise to meet the frequency of your state. So cultivate your own inner state. And for the men who are witnessing this great forthcoming, you are being called into a different kind of role in leadership as space holders, deep listeners, and ardent protectors of the feminine frequency that you have been longing for and missing for so long. Women have been juggling this masculinized energy expression out of necessity for so long. Step up and meet us as guardians of right relationship. Offer a space for us to soften into. Purify the top-down structures with your grounded presence. This is where you find your power now. The witches are coming back. They've been making their way and rebranding themselves in the shadows for centuries. Now healed and whole, the wise ones, the wisdom keepers, are reemerging. And the great fires are being lit again, not to instill fear or to threaten, but to burn away the unnecessary, to guide and to celebrate. You are not alone, and you no longer have to ask for permission. This is the time. The circle is opening. Step inside. If you would like to work more deeply with me, there are links in the description box below. This was a big one. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time.